there's 3 of you.
There's probably more than that, right?
Now, if you guys can condense a little bit.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to go over here.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning for an important announcement. Truly a testament to the great work of our men and women in law enforcement, both state and federal. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce some of the folks that are with me today. Florida Department of Law Enforcement Commissioner Mark Glass, Hendry County Sheriff Steve Whidden, Florida Department of Corrections Chief of Investigations Darrell Cherry, Fort Myers FDLE Special Agent in Charge Eli Lawson, Tampa Bay FDLE Special Agent in Charge Mark Brutnell, FBI Tampa Assistant Special Agent in Charge Rodney Crawford, and Chief of Fort Myers Assistant Statewide Prosecution Tim Donnelly, and Homeland Security Assistant Special Agent in Charge John Dumas. Today's announcement truly is the remarkable result of hand-in-hand partnership between local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. As many of you know, here in Florida, as in every other state across our nation, we have been faced with the frightening challenge of fentanyl. Fentanyl is a highly potent, deadly drug that is flooding into our country and resulting in the loss of life. Over 107,000 Americans died in our last yearly count, thousands here in Florida, the majority of those to fentanyl. And so that is why efforts by law enforcement to combat this overwhelming tide of deadly poison in our states is so needed. And that's why today's announcement is a source of pride for those that have been working so hard in Florida to save lives. It is important that you are here today to help us get this message out to Floridians so that they understand how deadly this drug is, and that it is not just being presented in the traditional ways we have seen illicit narcotics being pushed into our communities in the past. We are now seeing drug traffickers even target the most vulnerable and youngest among our communities, not only disguising these drugs to look like candy, but also taking fentanyl and putting it in the packaging of traditional candies that my children, and I'm sure many children in this state, so often enjoy. And that is terrifying. In just a minute, FDLE Commissioner Mark Glass will lay out the details of a massive, violent gang operation who were moving unfathomable amounts of fentanyl throughout Florida. My statewide prosecutors will be handling this case. We have charged 25 defendants, many of whom are linked to Mexican drug cartels. This isn't an anomaly. I wish today's announcement is a rare occurrence. But if you just look back a couple of months, you will see that throughout Florida, we have been announcing historic seizures of fentanyl. And not just fentanyl alone, but that deadly drug laced into other, more traditional illicit substances. Many who will die from fentanyl will never know that they have ingested this poison. Since June, authorities all over our state have seized nearly 35 pounds of fentanyl. And to put that in more dire terms, it is enough to kill 66 out of the 67 counties of population here in Florida in just a few months. 2 milligrams is all it takes to kill an individual. We recognize that law enforcement officers are dealing with a lot right now in Florida. In fact, we have all been praising their heroic actions in both preparation for the devastating hurricane that hit our shores and also in the recovery. We have also recently, as of yesterday, mourned an officer who gave his life bravely to protect Floridians and go after violent individuals. But the fentanyl crisis presents a new challenge. They know that if they don't get this off the street, it will. It's not if. It will kill Floridians. And not only are they working to take it off the streets, they themselves, when they have come in contact with it, have overdosed. We have seen routine incidents of mass fentanyl occurrences here in Florida where those rushing to help those that have overdosed, they themselves experienced the same symptoms. That is why I have pushed with other attorneys general around the nation in a bipartisan fashion to encourage this administration to secure our border. The Mexican drug cartels, many of which are involved in this specific case, do not value human life. Human life is an expense on their balance sheet, on their income statement. Human life has no meaning to them. They care about profit and they care about power. And the folks that helped work on this case today understand that. And so we have to continue to support the men and women of law enforcement who not are only bravely facing the challenges historically that they have signed up to face, now find themselves in a crisis that was not of their own doing, but has been pushed upon them because the surge of fentanyl into this country and into the state of Florida. The amounts that we are seeing and the number of Floridians they can kill is astonishing. Many presume that this drug is being stockpiled in our country now and could be used for mass casualty events. I commend the DEA for alarming the American public and telling them this is the most dangerous drug they have seen, that it's coming through the Mexican border. And I again call on the Biden administration, Secretary Mayorkas, to start enforcing public safety immigration laws and securing our border so that the folks behind me do not have to keep facing this deadly poison every day. Earlier this month, I met with Families Against Fentanyl, who is also a group that is pleading on behalf of families that have lost loved ones and children to fentanyl poisoning. I remind the public that this is a hand-in-hand operation between our local, state, and federal partners. We will continue to work collaboratively and proactively together to face this fentanyl crisis. Florida is a law and order state. We will not tolerate this in our state. That is why we are seeking the highest of penalties and charges, not only going after these individuals for their violent acts and their drug trafficking of fentanyl, but conspiracy to commit murder. I want to thank all of the partners that are standing with me today. I also, as a mother, again plead with parents, guardians, anyone who has interactions with young people. We are seeing more and more young people taking a pill, thinking it is something that cannot hurt them at the urging of friends or because they see it or purchase it online. And it ends up being laced with fentanyl. We know that a large majority of counterfeit pills are laced with fentanyl. This is the time to talk to your children. The potency of the drug, the sheer volume of the drug that is in our country is presenting challenges for parents like we have never seen before. I have had these discussions with my own children, and I plead with parents across Florida to do the same. Thank you again for helping us get this message out. Thank you again for helping us commend the amazing efforts of our partners, our law enforcement partners that are with us today. And at this point, I'm going to call up FDLE Commissioner Mark Glass.
Thank you, General. I cannot reiterate the strong warning our Attorney General has said about this atrocious substance that's infiltrated our state and our country. So I thank you for you challenging us and taking on this as a fight for our American people and for the state of Florida. So thank you, General. The suspects you see here today are charged with more than 60 first-degree felonies of drug trafficking and violent crime. Everything from conspiracy to commit murder to directing the activities of criminal gang to conspiracy to commit aggravated battery on prison inmates, racketeering, and trafficking controlled substances. The gang's kingpin is inmate Carlos Martinez, who is serving a 30-year prison sentence for attempted murder. From inside a correctional institution, he and his co-conspirator were able to move large shipments of narcotics and this atrocious drug throughout the United States into the state of Florida and to get it distributed. He provided orders and instruction to his gang members living in our communities and carrying out these orders where you live. And while much of the involved drug trafficking, many of these suspects use violence both inside and outside of prison to protect and enhance their drug trafficking operation. In some cases, Martinez would direct gang members to hurt other gang members who he felt disrespected him. There is no question that this was a very dangerous gang. Investigators uncovered dozens of firearms to be used by the Sewer 13 members and to be sold on the black market, and in all, 45 guns were recovered. And to underscore this organization, more than $150,000 in cash was also seized. As part of this case, agents also seized 48 pounds hear me. You just heard the Attorney General tell you how much could kill you. 48 pounds of fentanyl and 15,000 fentanyl pills to be distributed in the state. They also seized more than 350 pounds of methamphetamines. And we do know how methamphetamines are infiltrated our counties and our cities and our communities and how it's reacting to family members and people that friends of yours. There's no doubt that the work of our FDLE agents in partnership with deputies in the Hendry County Sheriff's Office, HSI investigations, FBI, and Attorney General Moody's Office of Statewide Prosecution saved countless lives in Florida and most likely throughout the United States. I am proud of our work on this case, and I'm proud of our partnership. Without Hendry County Sheriff Whidden and his deputies, it would be extremely difficult to infiltrate this gang. But by combining our strengths, we were not only able to infiltrate it, but effectively shut it down. Sheriff Whidden, thank you and for your help, and would you like to say a few words?
Absolutely. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I can't say what an honor it is to stand up here before so many great men and women in law enforcement who worked on this case with us. This has been quite the case from the get-go, not only for reference to the amount of deadly narcotics that we've taken off the street, but due to the character of these bad actors that we've arrested. You know, I want to take some time just to thank some people, and I want to start out with my narcotics unit. I won't mention their names, but they did a very outstanding job on this case from day one, you know, and when they realized how far-reaching this case could go, they reached out to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, who jumped right in with us, and I just want to thank those guys for their cooperation and the outstanding job that they did. You know, I also want to thank the Attorney General Moody. She has been phenomenal in her office in this case, and we are so blessed in the state of Florida to have someone like her. Because I'm going to tell you, the amount of narcotics and the uptick that we've seen in Hendry County over the last 2 years is a direct result of this open border. And like the Attorney General said, it needs to stop. The president needs to get on the stick and do what it takes to secure our border, because if it's not secure, this is not going to stop and more people are going to die. But I can tell you how lucky we are to live in a state where we have a governor like we do, Governor DeSantis, and an attorney general like we do, that is willing to fight the fight and keep us safe. You know, some people talk about law and order and protecting our citizens, and some people show it. So, Attorney General, I want to thank you personally for being the person you are and keeping us safe. Thank you. And I know I've missed a lot of people who's worked on this case, Tim, everybody, but thank you sincerely, because we have really put a dent not only in Hendry County with the narcotic trade, but in Florida as a whole. So thank you to everybody. I know I've missed a lot of people. This time I'd like to call up the Fort Myers FDLE Special Agent in Charge, Eli Lawson.
Thank you, Sheriff. I'm Eli Lawson, FDLE Special Agent in Charge of the Fort Myers region. The Operation 13 Tiers is the culmination of an exhaustive 2-year investigation into the SIR 13 gang that was led by FDLE's Fort Myers region and also assisted by all 6 of our other regions, but particularly here in Tampa Bay. It began in the summer of 2020 when FDLE agents received tips and information about SIR 13 and a large drug trafficking network operating in Southwest Florida. Following those tips that we received, we quickly discovered an extensive criminal network responsible for distributing large quantities of fentanyl and methamphetamine into our communities both in Southwest Florida and here in Central Florida. Historically, the SIR 13 gang, which is also known as the Sureños, began as a prison gang operating in Southern California in the 1960s and 70s. Today, that gang is nationwide and beyond. Their members operate from both inside prison walls and outside of them, living in our communities and our neighborhoods. As you can see from the board, 24 suspects were arrested, but 1 gang member remains at large. 39-year-old Efren Berumen from Kissimmee, Florida. If you have information about Berumen and his whereabouts, please call FDLE. I would like to conclude my remarks with a special thank you to our investigative team, our FDLE special agents and crime intelligence analysts, along with our partner agencies standing with me today and others, worked tirelessly to not just temporarily disrupt the flow of these illegal drugs, but to effectively dismantle a very dangerous and violent criminal organization. I am so very proud of all of them. I also want to thank AG Moody and her Office of Statewide Prosecution for their partnership. They've been tremendous all the way through this case, and we look forward to successful prosecution of the members of this criminal network. Thank you very much. Ms. Moody, I'd invite you back for some conclusions.
Sheriff Whidden came to be with us here in the Tampa Bay area because his deputies were involved, and I just want to highlight that. Sheriff Whidden said how proud he was of his deputies there. He has a small narcotics unit. They have a small department. But this is such a crisis. There is so much of fentanyl and other drugs that we seized. I mean, you heard 380 pounds of methamphetamine, not to mention the morphine, heroin, cocaine that was also seized. The challenges that even our small sheriff's departments face are now being forced to divert attention to this fentanyl crisis. And they're doing it admirably and successfully. But that's something that just 5 years ago, we could not have planned for and expected. This has been overwhelming for their departments, and I commend not only Sheriff Whidden's department, but all the other departments that assisted in this investigation that are smaller, that aren't with us. From Highlands to Lee to Polk, there were other sheriff's deputies involved in helping us apprehend these criminal gang members. So this is a challenge for Florida, one that we intend to meet aggressively and head on. We will continue to do so. All of these folks standing behind me, including the dozens that were involved in the successful resolution of these apprehensions and charges, they took an oath to protect and serve. They take that seriously, even in the face of this crisis. And so we appreciate you helping us again highlight their efforts and warn Floridians about the challenges we are facing today. I'd be happy to take any questions. I'm sure anyone behind me would be happy to take any questions you might have about the case.
Attorney General, with these suspects, did they live in a general area, or how many counties did this span across the state?
Well, as you heard me talk about the number of counties that were involved in successfully going after these folks, numerous deputies, usually that means they're all over the place when we're trying to make those arrests, but to be specific, I'll call up Mr. Glass or Eli.
Sure, I can speak to that. So most of the people you see pictured there were throughout Southwest Florida, but it spanned up into the Tampa Bay, Polk County, Volusia County, and beyond. And I would highlight that this is not the end of the case. We do anticipate additional charges potentially in the future.
And forgive me, I missed the very beginning of what you were saying. This has spanned a year and a half?
Approximately 2 years when FDLE started this case, yes.
And what was the initial tip that came in?
We identified some very specific people operating in our area near Fort Myers who were distributing street-level and mid-level narcotics, who were then affiliated with the people you see photographed here.
This has been going on for years, right? Fentanyl is nothing new here, and it seems this is fantastic, but we're going to hear about this again. So how do you continue to not make this white noise to people who watch and say, oh yeah, it's another fentanyl bust?
So I think by the sheer volume in this case, this is not just an average seizure. Nearly 50 pounds is a significant interruption in the flow of narcotics. This particular group controlled the flow of narcotics to this gang into the state of Florida. And the sheer volume speaks to the extraordinary efforts that went into it, that definitely dismantled them and prevented them from flowing more narcotics into it. And of course, we're going to continue this from here on out. We're not done now. We are going to continue this day in, day out to fight this narcotics battle. Would you like-
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Sorry?
You mentioned something about
Carlos Martinez was the head of the organization. Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us any background on him? Can you give us any information on him?
So we know Carlos Martinez. He is in prison since mid-2000s. He has been a lifetime gang member, self-identified gang member, and head of this organization for the state of Florida.
And he ran this operation and others?
He ran this organization that you see before you, and he has contacts throughout the nation.
Any idea how he was able to run it inside four walls?
So what I can tell you is the investigation is still ongoing. Their particular methods will be disclosed more as the prosecution unfolds, but they had extensive means of communicating with people on the outside. Most of the people you see photographed there were not in prison. They had means to communicate with them, who would carry out their directives on behalf of the gang.
Is there an investigation going on into that prison?
Into the prison itself?
Well, the fact that he was able to run such a huge,
Well, we are targeting him and his network, who happen to be inmates, but there's no indication of any affiliation through the Department of Corrections. They've been nothing but a great partner in this case.
can we expect more arrests down the road beyond these 25 people?
Yes, sir. This investigation is not stopped at this point. We are continuing to this day and will for months ahead.
And I want to say what a great question that was. As someone who is seeing the death toll from fentanyl rise sharply, and seeing the sheer amounts of fentanyl that are being seized rise sharply, especially within the last few months, there's always the challenge that as these continue to be announced, people will understand the magnitude of the volume or the crisis that we are now in this moment experiencing. You are correct, we have known about fentanyl. But the alarming rate in which it has been showing up in our country and in our states within the last year, particularly within the last 3 months, there was 1 month where the increase in seizures at the border of fentanyl could have killed the whole US population. So right now, with the amounts that we're seeing, coupled with the potency of the drug, that is the challenge we're facing in this moment. So you are correct. As we announce these large seizures, people don't understand, what does that mean, 50 pounds of fentanyl? That could kill half of Florida's population. That is an incredibly large seizure. That's a historic seizure. And in trying to put that in perspective, just in the last couple months, we've seized enough right here in Florida to kill our entire state. That has not happened. We have only been facing this within the last year and a half. And it directly coincides and stems from the lax, wide open border. There's a reason we have public safety immigration laws. There is a reason for that. There is a reason I started pushing back immediately when I saw those stop being enforced, because we know, we live this. I used to be a prosecutor. I was a judge for over a decade. We know what happens as a result of that. And the numbers are like we have never seen in the history of our country. And so that's why today is important. That's why the efforts of these men and women is important. And you also said, how did this start? Was this a tip? So many of these important seizures and operations stem from tips, from people in communities that are tired of it. They're tired of seeing their friends lose children. They're tired of seeing their community members ravaged by gang activity. They want to be a positive influence in solving that. They don't know where to start, which is why we launched Star Tips. Wherever you are in the state, if you want to help and you have information, you know somebody that you know is talking about fentanyl, or a kid that showed up with pills that they got online, I don't care how old you are. If you're in high school, help us. If you're a mom in a community, help us. Call Star Tips. You can do it anonymously. You could help result in a case like this behind me, saving Floridians' lives by just giving us information, and you don't even have to give us your name.
Are you concerned that this is going on in Florida state prisons then, that there's a network and that somebody's allowed to operate? What are you doing?
Of course.
I mean, that's frightening to me.
Of course, and you know, over the course of history, not in Florida and in all states and federally, it is always a challenge to ensure that we are identifying any criminal activity taking place in whether it's a state prison or a federal prison or even a county jail. And so all of the investigations, whether it's this one or any others you see federally or in other states, if that is a component, and in this particular case, it was a minority of individuals, most of those that were operating within these dangerous, violent gangs were outside. But anytime that happens, you will absolutely see follow-up, identifying how that was able to occur, changing the way you approach certain procedures or safety mechanisms within those institutions. That's always part of it. So we always want to make sure that when we are talking about these cases, we're very clear, whether it's if we see it as a large part of the case, or if there were any individuals that were able to communicate and do things, but certainly that will be followed up on.
Are all these American citizens or anyone here that shouldn't be here?
No, we have identified at least one that is here illegally. And again, you know, that will continue to be a problem. In Florida, we know that we have suffered effects of those that have come in unvetted and don't have the best of intentions. And we're working every day to try and identify those folks that are committing crimes and arrest them, and hopefully our litigation will prove successful and they will start removing people here that are committing crimes against our citizens that are here illegally, as they are required to do by federal law. But I'm having to actually force that in court.
Did a story a week before Christmas, this last Christmas family, personal friends, Indiana, daughter, in a rehab center, got one of the girls, didn't make it. She calls it, her mother calls it a weapon of mass destruction. It's the families that it also brings down the line. How do we keep our kids at our hands out of it, other than education? We gotta go hard, I think, a little bit harder than maybe in the schools. I don't know, what do you think?
It's a great question, and we're dealing with this on two fronts. There's the front where this is being laced in drugs that are traditional drugs, cocaine, other drugs that when folks ingest it, let me be clear, do not use an illicit substance. Number one, it's illegal, but it will harm you. You can die from overdosing on illegal substances, but the problem with fentanyl is being laced in drugs without those ingesting it, knowing it's in there, and they're dying. And so making sure that that word is out, the volume of fentanyl in our country right now is so overwhelming, you better believe it is likely in a drug that you are ingesting. If you're a kid and you're taking a pill from a friend that the friend tells you it's Adderall, it may have fentanyl, and it could kill you, because we've seen that. The second component to this is we are seeing more and more mass casualty or mass overdose situations because of its potency and because it's available, and people are putting it in everything. Right here in Florida, we saw the West Point cadets that overdosed in South Florida. Even someone coming to the aid of them overdosed who had not ingested fentanyl but trying to help overdosed. We saw right here in Hillsborough County, 7 people in the parking lot at a gas station had overdosed. Deputies roll up, folks are unconscious. In one weekend, in Gadsden County, a small rural county who had lost no one to overdose the year before, in one weekend, July 4th, around July 4th weekend, lost, I think they had 19 overdoses, approximately 10 deaths in one weekend from fentanyl. And so your question is particularly relevant, but it also presents the challenge. It's not just individuals that may take something that they don't understand what fentanyl is. We're now seeing it coming in such large quantities, 50 pounds just today in this one case, enough to kill half of the population in Florida. We know, and we've briefed law enforcement, that this can be used in mass casualty events. We know it's being collected in large amounts here in the U.S., and we also know we are seeing sharp rises in those that have come across our border that are on terrorist watch lists, that, like, in numbers we have never seen before. So just in this last short period, in the last few months, I think it beat the last 5 years combined. I think it was 5 times the last 5 years combined in number of people that are on the terrorist watch list. And we now have a substance in our country being allowed to pour in that can affect mass number of people at one time and result in large amounts of death. So this is important. There are numerous fronts in which we need to be concerned. All the more reason we need to be here today warning Floridians and praising the successful results of the men and women standing with me today. So thank you so much. Last question.
I have one. So numbers of seizures. Are you guys seeing these types of seizures in other states, border states, not just to the south, but also to the north?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, if one did a quick search when you left here today, you would see states that are seizing fentanyl in record numbers, amounts that they had never seen before, enough to kill large swaths of their population. I mentioned earlier that I have teamed with other attorneys general to press this to be declared a weapon of mass destruction, which would allow us to target it when it's still with the Mexican cartels before it even enters this country. It would allow us to bring in other resources. It would also, again, raise the alarm to the American public of how dangerous this is. One of my fellow colleagues out of the Connecticut area, a Democrat colleague who joined with me in this push to make it a weapon of mass destruction, in their county, they're seeing where they're stuffing the fentanyl pills into candy packages. Halloween is coming up. Parents need to be aware of this practice, not only the form of the substance, but the packaging they're putting it in.
So it's not just the southern states, it's northern states as well.
The DEA would confirm, and I will tell you, not only as a former federal prosecutor, but in all of my work in these cases, the precursor chemicals are manufactured in China. They are given to the Mexican drug cartels that manufacture fentanyl and other synthetic opioids, and then they are pouring over our southern border and making it into every one of our states in this country. It is no longer only the problem of border states in terms of the effect of the border. We are all facing it.
But to be clear, all but one of these people was an American citizen. They didn't bring it in from,
In this specific case, we know that it is sourced from not only Mexico, but California, and the organizations, violent organizations, were trafficking it throughout our state.